I loved you in secret, he said, his voice cold as stone. But I will marry in public. The ballroom went silent. Every eye turned to Prudence Hale, the seamstress in borrowed silk, standing 3 feet from the man who'd just destroyed her in front of 200 witnesses. She didn't cry, didn't beg. She simply walked out into the rain, leaving wet footprints on marble that cost more than her entire life. By morning, the rumors would reach every corner of town. By noon, her shop would be empty. By nightfall, she'd be ruined. But here's the thing about women who build empires from thread and willpower. They don't collapse quietly. This is the story of how Prudence Hale refused to disappear, how she turned public humiliation into a private war, how she dragged a lord into court, forced the truth into daylight, and rebuilt everything on her own terms. If you want to see how far this fight goes, stay until the end. Drop a like, tell me what city you're watching from, and let's see how far this story can travel. Because revenge isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just refusing to break. The first mistake Prudence made was believing silence meant safety. She'd kept their affair quiet for 8 months. Meeting in the back parlor of his estate when the staff was dismissed, sharing wine in rooms where portraits of dead blackthorns stared down with painted disapproval. Rowan never took her to dinners, never introduced her to his circle, but he touched her like she mattered, spoke to her like she was more than the woman who hemmed his shirts, and she, foolish, desperate, had mistaken restraint for discretion. She should have known better. Standing now at the edge of Marlingford Hall's grand ballroom, Prudence felt the weight of silk against her skin. A gown she'd spent 3 weeks making, cream-colored with lace at the cuffs, elegant enough to pass but plain enough not to offend. Rowan had sent the invitation himself. "Come," he'd written, "it's time." Time for what? He hadn't said. She'd assumed it meant stepping out of shadow. She'd been wrong about that too. "Miss Hale." His voice cut through the low hum of conversation. Prudence turned, heart thudding, and found Rowan Blackthorne standing 10 feet away, dressed in black and silver, his expression so carefully neutral it might as well have been carved from ice. "Lord Blackthorne." She kept her voice even, though her palms were damp inside her gloves. He didn't move closer, didn't smile. Around them, conversation stuttered and stopped. Fans slowed, faces turned. "I wanted to address a misunderstanding," Rowan said, loud enough for the nearest 20 people to hear. "There have been rumors, suggestions of an attachment between us." Prudence's stomach dropped. "I thought it best," he continued, "to clarify publicly. You've done excellent work for my household, Miss Hale. Your skills as a seamstress are admirable. But there is nothing more between us than a professional arrangement. I hope that settles the matter." The silence that followed was suffocating. Prudence stood perfectly still, aware of every gaze pinning her in place. Her throat burned, her hands trembled. But she forced herself to nod once, slowly, as if this was a reasonable thing to say. As if he hadn't spent the last 8 months unraveling her in lamplight, whispering promises against her collarbone. "Of course, my lord," she said quietly. "I appreciate the clarification." Then she turned and walked toward the doors, each step measured, shoulders straight. She didn't run, didn't stumble. She simply left, and the crowd parted like she was contagious. The rain hit her the moment she stepped outside. Cold, relentless, soaking through silk in seconds. Prudence walked down the gravel drive without looking back, her shoes squelching in mud, her breath coming in short, sharp gasps that had nothing to do with exertion. Professional arrangement, nothing more. She'd given him everything soft in her, and he'd handed it back like a receipt. By the time she reached the main road, her gown was ruined. By the time she made it to Ashbourne, 3 miles on foot because no carriage would stop for a woman alone in the dark, her feet were bleeding inside her slippers. The shop was dark when she unlocked the door. Silent. Prudence stepped inside, dripping onto the floorboards, and locked the door behind her. Then finally, she let herself break. Not loudly, not dramatically. She just sank onto the floor, pressed her forehead against her knees, and let the truth settle over her like a shroud. She'd been a fool. Morning came too soon. Prudence woke on the floor where she'd collapsed, stiff and cold, the ruined gown still clinging to her like a second skin. For a moment, she considered staying there, closing the shop, disappearing. Then she heard voices outside. She pushed herself up, joints aching, and moved to the window. A small crowd had gathered across the street. Women in day dresses, a few men in shirt sleeves, all talking in low, excited tones. One of them glanced toward the shop, saw Prudence in the window, and quickly looked away. So it had already started. Prudence washed her face in the basin, changed into a plain work dress, and pinned her hair back with shaking hands. She would not hide. She would not run. She opened the shop at 9, same as always, and sat down at her work table like nothing had happened. The first hour passed in silence. The second brought Clara Pembroke, one of her regulars, who hovered near the door for a full minute before stepping inside. "Miss Hale," Clara said, voice low. I'm so sorry, but I'll need to collect my order, and, well, I won't be placing another." Prudence set down her needle. "May I ask why?" Clara's cheeks flushed. "My husband thinks it's inappropriate, given the talk." "The talk," Prudence repeated. "You mean the rumor that I dared to exist in the same room as Lord Blackthorne?" "That's not," Clara faltered. "People are saying you tried to trap him, that you forced your way into that event. I was invited." "I know, but—" Clara twisted her hands together. "It doesn't matter what's true, Miss Hale. It matters what people believe, and right now, I'm sorry. I truly am." She left with her order tucked under her arm, and Prudence was alone again. 3 more cancellations came that afternoon. By evening, the appointment book was nearly empty. Prudence sat at her table, staring at the half-finished gown in front of her, and felt something cold settle in her chest. Not grief, not shock, clarity. She'd spent years building this shop from nothing, taught herself every stitch, every pattern. She'd taken in apprentices, girls like Beatrice and Anne and little Joanna, who had nowhere else to go, and given them a trade, a future. She'd done everything right, and it had taken one man, one sentence to unravel it all. "Miss Hale?" She looked up. Beatrice stood in the doorway to the back room, her face pale. "There's someone here to see you." Prudence frowned. "Who?" Beatrice stepped aside, and Rowan Blackthorne walked into the shop. He looked different in daylight, less untouchable, more human. His coat was slightly wrinkled. His hair, usually perfectly combed, fell across his forehead. He stopped a few feet from her work table, hands at his sides. "Prudence," he said quietly. "Miss Hale," she corrected, "since we're keeping things professional." His jaw tightened. "I came to explain." "Don't." "You don't understand the pressure. I understand perfectly." Prudence stood, her voice steady. "You were afraid of what people would think, so you cut me loose in the cruelest way possible. That's not complicated, Rowan. That's just cowardice." He flinched. "I didn't want to hurt you." "Then you failed spectacularly." Silence stretched between them. Rowan looked like he wanted to step closer, but didn't dare. "I can help you," he said finally. "Financially. I can make sure the shop survives. You can leave." "Prudence, leave." He stared at her for a long moment, something crumbling behind his eyes. Then he nodded once and walked out. Prudence watched him go, her hands trembling against the table. She'd meant what she said. She didn't want his money, didn't want his guilty conscience eased. But she also knew, with cold certainty, that this wasn't over. Because powerful men didn't just walk away. They made sure you couldn't stand back up. Oh, the second blow came a week later. Prudence was working late, finishing an alteration for one of her few remaining clients, when Beatrice burst through the door, breathless. "Miss Hale, there's a new shop. On Bramble Street." Prudence looked up. "What kind of shop?" "Dressmaking, tailoring, same as us." Beatrice swallowed. "But fancier. They've got 3 seamstresses already, and the fabrics. Miss Hale, the fabrics are expensive. Silks from France. Lace from Belgium. I don't know how they're affording it." Prudence set down her needle carefully. "Who owns it?" "A woman named Mrs. Carrick. She's new in town. Arrived last week." "Last week?" Prudence repeated. "Right after the ball. Right after Rowan's public rejection. Coincidence felt unlikely. She visited the shop the next morning dressed simply, a shawl pulled over her hair. The storefront was pristine, painted shutters, gold lettering, a display window filled with gowns that would have taken Prudence months to afford the fabric for. Inside, Mrs. Carrick was a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s, dressed in dark green silk, her smile polite but cold. "May I help you?" she asked. "Just browsing," Prudence said. She moved through the shop slowly, taking in the bolts of fabric, the ready-made gowns, the price list posted near the counter. Everything was undercut, just enough to lure customers away without seeming desperate. "We're offering a special rate for new clients," Mrs. Carrick said, watching her. "First order, half price." Prudence met her gaze. "That's generous. I believe in building goodwill." "Goodwill," Prudence echoed. "Or buying it." Mrs. Carrick's smile didn't waver. "I'm not sure I know what you mean, Miss Hale." Something flickered in the older woman's eyes. "Ah, I've heard of you. I'm sure you have." "Then you know," Mrs. Carrick said lightly, "that reputations can be fragile, especially for women working alone." It wasn't a threat, not quite, but it was close enough. Prudence left without another word. Over the next 2 weeks, the shop hemorrhaged clients. Not all at once, just a slow, steady bleed. Women who'd promised orders suddenly remembered prior commitments. New inquiries dried up. Even the apprentices grew nervous, whispering when they thought Prudence wasn't listening. Then the inspector came. He arrived on a Thursday morning, a thin man with a pinched face and a leather case full of papers. "Miss Hale, I'm Inspector Grayson. I've received complaints about the working conditions here." Prudence's stomach went cold. "What kind of complaints?" "Concerns about the welfare of your apprentices, their ages, their treatment." "They're well cared for," Prudence said sharply. "I provide meals, lodging, and fair wages. I'll need to verify that." He glanced around the shop. "I'll also need to speak with the girls privately." Prudence wanted to refuse, wanted to throw him out, but she knew how this worked. Refusal would be taken as guilt. "Of course," she said. He spent 2 hours interviewing Beatrice, Anne, and Joanna. Prudence sat at her work table, hands clenched, listening to the low murmur of voices from the back room. When he finally left, he didn't say whether she'd passed or failed, just tipped his hat and walked out. Beatrice came to her afterward, eyes red. "He asked terrible things," she whispered. "If you hit us, if you fed us, if we were allowed to leave." "What did you tell him?" "The truth." Beatrice's voice shook. "But I don't think he believed me." Prudence pulled the girl into a hug, fury building in her chest. This wasn't about her anymore. They were going after the girls, the ones who had nothing, no one, nowhere else to go. That night, Rowan returned. He didn't knock, just walked in through the back door like he still had the right. Prudence was sitting at her work table, a cold cup of tea beside her, staring at the account books. She looked up, unsurprised. "You should lock your doors," he said. "I should do a lot of things." He moved closer, stopping a few feet away. In the lamplight, he looked exhausted, shadows under his eyes, his cravat loose. "I heard about the inspection," he said. "Of course you did." "Prudence, I didn't..." "Didn't what?" "Didn't arrange it? Didn't pay Mrs. Carrick to open a rival shop? Didn't quietly make sure every respectable woman in town knows I'm ruined?" She stood, voice rising. "Which part didn't you do, Rowan?" "None of it." He sounded desperate. "I swear to you, your word means nothing." He flinched. "My family is behind this, my mother, my uncle. They think they're protecting the family name. I've tried to stop them. Not hard enough. I can fix this," he said urgently. "I can make them back off. But you need to let me help you." "How?" "Leave Ashbourne. I'll set you up somewhere else. A new shop, a new name. Somewhere they can't reach you." Prudence stared at him. "You want me to run?" "I want you to survive." "And what about Beatrice? Anne? Joanna? What happens to them?" He hesitated. "They can come with you." "And if they don't want to leave? If this is their home?" Prudence stepped closer, her voice hard. "You're asking me to disappear because it's easier than standing up to your family. I'm asking you to be smart." "No, you're asking me to be invisible." She shook her head. "I won't do it. Not for you. Not for anyone." "Then you'll lose everything." "Maybe. But I'll lose it on my terms." Rowan stared at her, something breaking in his expression. "I can't protect you if you stay. I never asked you to." He stood there a moment longer, looking like he wanted to argue, to beg. Then he turned and walked out, and this time Prudence knew he wouldn't come back. Not like this, not unless she forced his hand. The idea came to her slowly, over days of sleepless nights and dwindling funds. She couldn't fight the Blackthorns with money, couldn't fight them with influence. But there was one place where power had to answer to something bigger than reputation: the law. It was a desperate plan, reckless even. Women didn't sue powerful families. They didn't drag private grievances into public courts. But Prudence wasn't suing for heartbreak. She was suing for her apprentices. Because the inspection had been fraudulent, the complaints anonymous. And if she could prove that the Blackthorns had orchestrated it, had weaponized the law to destroy her livelihood, then maybe, just maybe, she could force them into the light. It would cost everything she had left. She'd need a solicitor willing to take the case, evidence, witnesses. But she had one advantage. She'd kept every letter Rowan ever sent her, every note, every scrap of proof that their relationship had been real. And if she had to burn it all down to survive, she would. Prudence pulled out the box from under her bed, hands steady, and began to sort through 8 months of stolen moments. She'd loved him in secret. Now she'd destroy him in public. And when the dust settled, they'd both see who was left standing. The solicitor's office smelled like old paper and defeat. Prudence sat across from Mr. Edmund Thorne, a man in his 60s with ink-stained fingers and a skeptical expression that deepened with every word she spoke. Behind him, shelves sagged under the weight of leather-bound legal texts that looked like they hadn't been opened in decades. "Let me be certain I understand," Thorne said, leaning back in his chair. "You want to sue the Blackthorn family for fraudulent interference with your business?" "Yes." "Based on what evidence?" Prudence placed the box on his desk. "Letters, dates, proof that Lord Blackthorn and I were involved personally before his public denial. Proof that the timing of Mrs. Carrick's shop, the inspection, and the withdrawal of my clients all aligned too perfectly to be coincidence." Thorne opened the box, pulled out a handful of letters, and scanned them with the detached interest of a man who'd seen every kind of human foolishness. He set them down after a moment. "These prove you had an affair," he said flatly. "They don't prove the Blackthorns orchestrated anything." "Then we find proof." "How?" "Mrs. Carrick's funding, the inspector's complaint records. Someone paid for all of this, and money leaves traces." Thorne removed his spectacles and rubbed the bridge of his nose. "Miss Hale, do you understand what you're proposing? You'd be dragging one of the most powerful families in the county into court. They have resources you can't imagine. Lawyers who've been practicing since before you were born. And even if we could prove interference, the court isn't sympathetic to women who involve themselves with men above their station." "I didn't involve myself," Prudence said sharply. "He pursued me. He invited me into his life, then discarded me when it became inconvenient. And now his family is trying to destroy the livelihood I built with my own hands because they think I'm a threat to their reputation." "Are you?" The question caught her off guard. Thorne's expression remained neutral, but there was something calculating in his eyes. "I never asked for money," Prudence said slowly. "Never threatened exposure, never demanded anything from him. All I wanted was to be acknowledged. When that didn't happen, I walked away." "They're the ones who decided that wasn't enough." Thorne studied her for a long moment. Then he reached for a clean sheet of paper. "This will be expensive," he warned. "And even if we win, you'll be marked forever. No respectable family will touch you. Your business may not recover. It won't recover anyway if I do nothing." "Fair point." He dipped his pen in ink. "Then let's start with what we can prove. You said the inspection was fraudulent. Do you have documentation?" "Inspector Grayson's report and my apprentice's testimonies." "Good. We'll also need Mrs. Carrick's financial records. Do you have any idea who might have funded her shop?" "No, but I know someone who might." Thorne raised an eyebrow. "Who?" Prudence hesitated. "Lord Blackthorn, the same man who publicly humiliated you. You think he'll help?" "No," Prudence said quietly, "but I think I can force him to." Egypt. She found Rowan at the estate 3 days later. Prudence didn't announce herself. She walked past the startled butler, ignored the housekeeper's protests, and marched straight into the library where Rowan spent his afternoons pretending to read. He looked up from his book, surprise flickering across his face, before hardening into something guarded. "You can't be here," he said, standing. "Sit down." "Prudence, sit down." Something in her voice made him obey. Prudence closed the library doors behind her and crossed to his desk, pulling out a folded document from her coat. "What is that?" Rowan asked warily. "A summons. I'm taking your family to court." The color drained from his face. "You're doing what?" "Suing them for fraudulent interference, conspiracy to damage my business. I'm filing next week." Rowan stared at her like she'd announced plans to burn down the estate. "You can't be serious." "Do I look like I'm joking?" He stood abruptly, pacing to the window. "Prudence, this is insane. You'll lose. They'll bury you in legal fees before you ever get near a courtroom." "Maybe. Or maybe I'll win." "You won't." He turned, his expression almost pitying. "Even if you had proof, which you don't, the court won't rule against my family. They have too much influence. Then I'll make enough noise that the influence doesn't matter. They'll destroy you." "They're already destroying me," Prudence's voice cracked. "Your mother paid Mrs. Carrick. Your uncle arranged the inspection. I don't have proof yet, but I will. And when I do, I'm dragging all of it into the light." Rowan looked stricken. "I told you, I didn't know. You didn't stop them either." She stepped closer. "You came to my shop. You offered me money, a new start, everything except the one thing I actually needed, for you to stand up and tell the truth. You don't understand the consequences." "I understand them perfectly. Your family thinks they can erase me because I don't matter, because I'm just a seamstress who got ideas above her station." She held up the summons. "This is me mattering, whether you like it or not." Rowan stared at the paper like it was a weapon. "What do you want from me?" "Mrs. Carrick's financial records. Proof of who's funding her shop." "I don't have access to that." "Yes, you do. Your uncle handles the family's business investments. You know where he keeps his records." "You want me to betray my own family." "I want you to tell the truth." Prudence's voice softened, just slightly. "You said you loved me. Prove it." Rowan's jaw worked. He looked away, out the window where the estate grounds stretched green and perfect under gray sky. "If I do this," he said finally, "there's no going back. They'll cut me off. Disown me." "I know. You're asking me to choose between you and everything I've ever had." "No," Prudence said. "I'm asking you to choose between doing what's right and doing what's easy. What you do with that is up to you." She left the summons on his desk and walked out. 2 days later, a package arrived at the shop. Beatrice brought it in from the step, frowning at the plain brown wrapping. Prudence opened it carefully, and her breath caught. Inside were ledgers, financial records, correspondence between Rowan's uncle, Lord Marcus Blackthorne, and Mrs. Carrick, dated 3 weeks before her shop opened. Payments. Instructions. Everything spelled out in neat, damning handwriting. There was no note from Rowan. No explanation, just the evidence, handed over like a blade. Prudence carried the package to Thorne's office that same afternoon. He spread the documents across his desk, reading in silence, his expression growing sharper with each page. "Where did you get these?" he asked finally. "Does it matter?" "It will in court. If they were stolen, they were given to me, voluntarily." Thorne looked at her over his spectacles. "By Lord Blackthorne, by someone who wants the truth to come out." He didn't press. Instead, he tapped the ledgers. "This is good. Very good. We can prove Mrs. Carrick's shop was funded by the Blackthorne estate. Combined with the timing of the inspection and your client's withdrawals, we have a pattern. Enough to win? Enough to make them nervous." Thorne leaned back. "Which means they'll fight harder. Are you prepared for that?" Prudence thought of Beatrice's frightened face during the inspection, of Anne crying in the back room when another regular canceled her order, of little Joanna asking if they'd have to leave. "Yes," she said. "Then we file tomorrow." Boom. The news spread through Ashbourne like wildfire. By the time Prudence walked home that evening, people were staring openly, whispering behind hands. A group of women outside the bakery fell silent as she passed, their eyes following her with something between shock and fascination. Inside the shop, the apprentices were waiting. "Is it true?" Beatrice asked, voice trembling. "You're really suing them?" "Yes." Anne grabbed the work table for support. "Miss Hale, they'll ruin you." "They're already trying." "But this is different," Joanna whispered. This is war." Prudence looked at the three girls, at their frightened faces, their thin shoulders, their hands still rough from years of needlework. They had nothing. No families, no protectors. Just this shop. Just her. "Listen to me," Prudence said quietly. "I'm not doing this out of pride. I'm doing it because they think they can take everything from us without consequence. They think we're too weak, too afraid, too small to fight back." "We are small," Anne said. "Then we'll make them see us anyway." Prudence straightened. "I'm not asking you to fight. If you want to leave, if you want to find positions elsewhere, I'll write you references. I won't hold it against you." Beatrice shook her head. "We're not leaving." "You don't have to." "We're not leaving," the girl repeated firmly. Anne and Joanna nodded. Something in Prudence's chest cracked open. "All right then, we do this together." They went back to work, Beatrice cutting fabric, Anne threading bobbins, Joanna sweeping the floor. Normal tasks, normal routines, but everything felt different now, sharper, like they were all holding their breath, waiting for the storm to hit. It didn't take long. The first attack came 2 days after they filed the lawsuit. Prudence was locking up for the evening when she heard glass shatter. She spun around to find the display window caved in, a brick lying among the shards. No one was on the street, no witnesses. She swept up the glass in silence, boarded the window with scrap wood, and added the repair cost to the growing list of things she couldn't afford. The second attack was subtler. A notice appeared in the town newspaper, anonymous, of course, warning respectable families about unscrupulous merchants who use the courts to extort money from their betters. It didn't name Prudence directly. It didn't have to. The third attack was the worst. Inspector Grayson returned, this time with a constable. They had a warrant to search the premises for evidence of moral corruption, which meant tearing through the apprentices' rooms, inspecting their belongings, looking for anything they could twist into impropriety. Prudence stood in the doorway of Beatrice's room, watching the constable rifle through the girl's few possessions, a hairbrush, a spare dress, a pressed flower tucked inside a book. "Find what you're looking for?" Prudence asked coldly. The constable didn't answer. He opened the wardrobe, checked under the bed, then moved to Anne's room. Grayson stood in the hallway, his pinched face smug. "We've had reports of improper conduct. Girls your age, living without family supervision. They have supervision. Mine. That's part of the concern." Prudence's hands clenched. "What exactly are you accusing me of?" "Nothing yet," he smiled thinly. "But the law takes the welfare of young women very seriously." He left without confiscating anything, but the message was clear. They could come back any time, could question the girls again, could make their lives miserable until Prudence broke. That night she found Joanna crying in the kitchen. "I'm scared," the girl whispered. "What if they take us away?" Prudence knelt beside her, brushing tears from her cheeks. "They won't." "You can't promise that." No. She couldn't. But she pulled Joanna close anyway, held her until the crying stopped, and silently vowed that she'd burn the Blackthorn estate to the ground before she let them destroy these girls. The preliminary hearing was set for 3 weeks later. Thorne prepared her carefully, explaining what questions to expect, how to address the magistrate, what not to say. But nothing could prepare her for walking into that courtroom and seeing the full force of Blackthorn power arrayed against her. Lord Marcus Blackthorn sat at the defendant's table with 2 lawyers in expensive coats. Behind him, the gallery was packed with well-dressed men and women who stared at Prudence like she was something they'd scraped off their shoes. Rowan wasn't there. The magistrate, a gray-haired man named Sir William Ashford, looked over his spectacles at Prudence with barely concealed distaste. "Miss Hale," he said, "you're representing yourself in this matter." "Mr. Thorne is my solicitor, Your Honor." "I see." Ashford glanced at the defense table. "And you're accusing Lord Blackthorn of interference with your business?" "Yes, Your Honor." "On what grounds?" Thorne stood. "We have documented evidence that the defendant funded a competing business specifically to drive Miss Hale out of operation. We also have proof of fraudulent inspections and coordinated client withdrawals." One of the defense lawyers, a tall man with a voice like gravel, rose smoothly. "Your Honor, this is nothing more than a scorned woman lashing out after a romantic entanglement ended poorly. Miss Hale has no proof of conspiracy, only circumstantial coincidences." "We have financial records," Thorne said sharply. "Obtained illegally, we suspect." They were provided voluntarily. By whom? Thorne hesitated. Prudence knew what he was thinking. If they named Rowan, the defense would tear into him, claim coercion or theft. But without naming him, the documents might be inadmissible. By someone with direct knowledge of the transactions, Thorne said carefully. The defense lawyer smiled. How convenient. Ashford tapped his gavel. I'll review the documents in chambers. In the meantime, Miss Hale, I hope you understand the seriousness of these accusations. Wasting the court's time with personal grievances is a punishable offense. I understand, Your Honor. Good. We'll reconvene in 1 week. The hearing ended. Prudence walked out of the courthouse into cold sunlight, feeling like she'd been scraped raw. Thorne caught up with her on the steps. That went about as well as expected. He's going to dismiss it, isn't he? Not yet, but he's looking for an excuse. Thorne glanced back at the courthouse. We need something stronger, something they can't explain away. Like what? A witness. Someone who can testify that the Blackthorns explicitly ordered the interference. Prudence shook her head. No one will risk that. Anyone with knowledge is either loyal to them or too afraid to speak. Then we find someone who isn't afraid. Where? Thorne didn't answer, but his expression said what they were both thinking. They were running out of options. That night, Prudence couldn't sleep. She sat at her work table, staring at the half-finished gown in front of her, needle motionless in her hand. The shop was quiet. The apprentices were asleep upstairs. Outside, Ashbourne lay dark and indifferent. She'd gambled everything on this lawsuit. Her savings, her reputation, the girl's futures. And she was losing. The defense was right. She had evidence, but no smoking gun. Nothing that definitively tied the attacks to Marcus Blackthorn's orders. And without that, Ashford would dismiss the case, and she'd be buried under legal fees with nothing to show for it. A knock at the back door startled her. Prudence grabbed the fire poker and moved quietly to the door. Who is it? It's me. Rowan's voice, hoarse, desperate. She opened the door a crack. He stood in the alley, soaked from rain she hadn't noticed starting, his coat dripping. What do you want? To help. He stepped forward, and she saw his face properly, bruised along the jaw, a cut above his eye. Let me in, please. Against her better judgment, she did. Rowan stumbled inside, leaning against the work table. Up close, the damage was worse. His knuckles split, his shirt torn. He looked like he'd been in a fight and lost badly. What happened? Prudence asked. Marcus. Rowan touched his jaw gingerly. He found out I gave you the ledgers. We had words. He did this to you? Not directly. He has men for that. Rowan laughed bitterly. Disowned me too, officially. As of this afternoon, I'm no longer a Blackthorn. Prudence stared at him. Why are you here? Because you were right. He met her eyes. About everything. I was a coward. I let them hurt you rather than standing up to them. And now they're going to win because I didn't do enough. You gave me the ledgers. That's not enough. Ashford won't rule against my family based on paperwork. He needs testimony. Rowan straightened, wincing. So I'll testify. Prudence's breath caught. Rowan, if you do that, I know. I'll lose everything. My name, my inheritance, whatever shred of reputation I have left. He smiled grimly. But I don't have those things anymore anyway. Marcus made sure of that. They'll destroy you in court. They're destroying you right now. At least this way I go down fighting. Prudence studied him, this man who'd hurt her so deeply, who'd chosen comfort over courage, who was now standing in her shop with blood on his knuckles offering the one thing that might save her. Why now? She asked quietly. Why not weeks ago, when I first asked? Rowan was silent for a long moment. Because I was still hoping I could fix things without losing my family. I thought I could convince Marcus to back off, make peace between you somehow. I was wrong. You can't make peace with people who see you as the enemy just for existing. He looked at her. I'm done trying to be what they want. I'd rather be honest and ruined than comfortable and complicit. It wasn't everything she'd wanted to hear, but it was something. All right, Prudence said. Then we do this together. She moved to her desk, pulled out paper and ink. We'll need to document everything. Every conversation you witnessed, every order Marcus gave, every piece of evidence you can provide. Thorne will want it all before the next hearing. Rowan nodded. When is it? 6 days. Then we'd better work fast. They sat at the work table side by side while rain hammered the roof and the night stretched long around them. Prudence asked questions. Rowan answered. Slowly, painfully, the full scope of Marcus's campaign took shape, not just against her, but against anyone who threatened the family's control. Mrs. Carrick had been one of many investments. The inspection, orchestrated through a corrupt magistrate who owed Marcus money. The client withdrawals achieved through quiet threats to their husband's business interests. It's not just you, Rowan said tiredly, rubbing his eyes. Marcus has done this to a dozen people over the years. Anyone who challenges the family gets crushed, then we'll expose all of it. It won't be enough to expose. We need proof. We have your testimony, which they'll say is revenge for being disowned. Rowan shook his head. We need someone else. Someone Marcus can't discredit. Prudence thought for a moment. The magistrate who approved the inspection. If we can prove he was bribed, he'll deny it. Not if we have his financial records, too. Rowan looked at her. You want to break into a magistrate's office? I want to win. A slow smile crossed his battered face. You're terrifying, you know that? I'm desperate. There's a difference. But as they bent back over the documents, mapping out Marcus's network of corruption, Prudence felt something shift. Not hope, exactly. Something harder. Something that tasted like iron and fury and the grim determination of someone who'd decided that if she was going down, she was taking the whole rotten structure with her. 6 days until the hearing. 6 days to gather proof that would either vindicate her or bury her forever. She met Rowan's eyes across the table. We can do this, she said. He nodded slowly. We can try. Outside, the rain fell harder, and somewhere in the darkness, Marcus Blackthorne sat in his study planning their destruction. But for the first time since this nightmare began, Prudence wasn't afraid. She was ready. The magistrate's office was locked, as expected. Prudence stood in the alley behind the building at midnight, rain soaking through her cloak while Rowan worked a thin metal pick into the door handle. His hands shook, from cold or nerves, she couldn't tell. I can't believe I'm doing this, he muttered. You can leave. I'm not leaving. The lock clicked. He pushed the door open, wincing at the creak. But if we're caught, then we're caught breaking into a magistrate's office to find evidence of his corruption, which sounds either brilliant or suicidal depending on how it ends. Probably suicidal. They slipped inside. The office was small, cramped with filing cabinets and stacks of paperwork that smelled like mildew and tobacco. A single window let in weak moonlight. Prudence moved to the desk while Rowan checked the cabinets. What exactly are we looking for? He whispered. Payment records, correspondence, anything linking Magistrate Hewitt to your uncle. Prudence opened a drawer, rifling through documents. Marcus didn't bribe him with kind words. There'll be money somewhere. And if there isn't? Then we break into Marcus's office next. Rowan shot her a look but didn't argue. He pulled open a cabinet, scanning files by the dim light filtering through the window. Minutes crawled past. Prudence's heart hammered against her ribs, every creak of the building making her freeze. Here, Rowan held up a ledger. Personal accounts. Look at this. 3 deposits in the last 6 months. £200 each. No source listed. Prudence moved to his side, squinting at the entries. When were they made? March, June, and 2 weeks before your inspection. Her breath caught. That's it. That's the pattern. It's not proof Marcus paid him. Not by itself. But combined with everything else, she grabbed the ledger. We're taking this. That's theft. So is what they did to me. Prudence tucked the ledger under her cloak. Let's go before... Light flooded the alley outside. They both froze. Voices drifted through the door, men's voices, low and casual. Footsteps on cobblestones. Night patrol, Rowan breathed. Prudence's mind raced. They couldn't leave through the back door without being seen. The front would be locked from outside. That left... The window, she whispered. They moved fast. Rowan shoved the window open while Prudence grabbed the ledger tighter. He climbed through first, landing in a crouch on the other side, then reached back for her. The door handle rattled. Prudence threw herself through the window just as the door swung open. She hit the ground hard, pain shooting through her shoulder. Rowan hauled her up, and they ran, sprinting through back alleys, feet splashing through puddles, the shouts of the patrol fading behind them. They didn't stop until they'd reached the shop. Inside, breathless and dripping, Prudence locked the door and leaned against it. Her shoulder throbbed. The ledger was still clutched against her chest, miraculously dry under the cloak. Rowan bent double, gasping. Never again. We got what we needed. We almost got arrested. Almost doesn't count. Prudence moved to the work table, spreading the ledger open. Even in lamplight, the evidence was damning. Regular payments, suspicious timing, no legitimate source. Rowan straightened, still breathing hard. You really think Thorne can use this? He'll have to. It's all we've got. She was right. When they brought the ledger to Thorne the next morning, his expression shifted from skeptical to calculating. This is good, he said slowly. Very good. Combined with Rowan's testimony and the original financial records, we can establish a clear pattern of bribery and interference. Will it be enough? Prudence asked. To win? Maybe. To make them sweat? He smiled grimly. Absolutely. The news of Rowan's disownment spread through Ashbourne like poison. By the second day, everyone knew. The gossip was vicious. Whispers that he'd betrayed his family for a seamstress, that he'd been cut off without a penny, that he was living in squalor somewhere, disgraced and desperate. Some of it was true. Rowan had taken a room above the tavern, the cheapest lodging in town. Prudence saw him in passing, his clothes less fine than before, his posture hunched like he was learning to carry shame as a permanent weight. She didn't seek him out. There was too much to do, too little time. The hearing was in 4 days, and Thorne was preparing their case with the intensity of a general planning a siege. But the Blackthorns weren't idle, either. On the third day, Mrs. Carrick's shop burned down. Prudence heard the fire bells at dawn and ran to Bramble Street to find the building engulfed, flames licking out of shattered windows. A crowd had gathered, watching in horrified fascination as the roof collapsed inward. Mrs. Carrick stood at the edge of the crowd, her face blank. Prudence pushed through to her. What happened? The older woman turned slowly. Up close, she looked hollowed out. I don't know. I woke to smoke. By the time I got out, it was too late. Was anyone hurt? No, just everything's gone. Mrs. Carrick's voice was flat. All the fabric, the machines, everything. Prudence should have felt satisfaction. This was her competitor, the weapon Marcus had used against her. But looking at Mrs. Carrick's devastated expression, all she felt was cold recognition. He did this, didn't he? Prudence said quietly. Marcus? Mrs. Carrick didn't answer, but her silence was confirmation enough. Why? Because I was going to testify. The older woman's voice cracked. I told his lawyer I'd cooperate with your case if they paid me what they still owed. They said no. I said I'd testify anyway. She gestured at the burning building. This is the answer. Prudence stared at the flames. You should still testify and end up worse than this? No. Mrs. Carrick shook her head. I'm leaving Ashbourne today, as soon as I can pack what's left. If you run, I survive. That's more than I'd manage if I stayed. She met Prudence's eyes. You should do the same. Get out while you can. Marcus Blackthorne doesn't lose. He just destroys everyone who tries to beat him. She walked away, disappearing into the crowd. Prudence stood watching the fire, feeling the heat on her face, and understood with perfect clarity that this was a message. Not just to Mrs. Carrick, to her. Emit. That afternoon, Thorne received a letter. He read it twice before looking up at Prudence, his expression grave. What is it? She asked. A settlement offer from Marcus's lawyers. He slid the letter across the desk. They're willing to drop all interference, restore your clients, and pay you £500 in damages. In exchange, you withdraw the lawsuit and sign a non-disclosure agreement. Prudence scanned the letter. The terms were generous, more than generous. £500 would save the shop, secure the apprentice's futures, give her breathing room for years. What do you think? She asked. Thorne leaned back. I think they're scared. They wouldn't offer this much unless they believed we could win, or unless they're planning something worse. Also possible. He studied her. This is a good offer, Prudence. Better than most people in your position would ever see. You could take it and walk away whole. whole except for my dignity. Dignity doesn't pay rent. No, but it's all I have left that's actually mine. Prudence pushed the letter back. Tell them no. Thorne didn't look surprised. You're certain? If I take this, Marcus wins. He learns he can destroy people's lives and buy his way out of consequences. And the next person he targets won't have the evidence I have. They'll just suffer and disappear. She stood. I'm not signing anything. We go to court. Even if we lose? Even then. Thorne nodded slowly. All right. Then we'd better make sure we don't lose. The night before the hearing, Prudence couldn't sleep. She sat in the dark shop, surrounded by unfinished work, listening to the apprentices breathe in the rooms above. Everything she'd built was here. Every stitch, every late night, every small victory against a world that wanted her to stay small. And tomorrow, it would either be vindicated or torn apart. A knock at the door startled her. She opened it to find Rowan, looking haggard in the lamplight. Can I come in? She stepped aside. He moved to the work table, running his fingers over the fabric there, a half-sewn gown in deep blue, one of the few orders she still had. I've been thinking, he said quietly, about what happens after tomorrow. After we win or after we lose? Both. He turned to face her. If we win, Marcus will appeal. He'll drag this out for years if he can. You'll be fighting him until you're broke or dead. I know. And if we lose, he'll make sure you never work again. You'll lose the shop. The girls will be taken. Everything you built will be gone. I know that too. Rowan's jaw tightened. Then why are you doing this? Because I'm tired of being afraid. Prudence met his gaze. I've spent my whole life trying to be small enough, quiet enough, acceptable enough that people wouldn't notice me. And the moment I wanted something more, the moment I wanted to be seen, they tried to erase me. So this is about revenge. No, this is about proving I exist. She moved closer. You said I'm terrifying. You're wrong. I'm just done pretending I don't matter. Rowan looked at her with something like awe. You're the strongest person I've ever met. I'm the most stubborn. There's a difference. He laughed, short and sharp. Then his expression sobered. I'm testifying tomorrow. But there's something you should know first. What? Marcus sent me a letter, through his lawyer. He's willing to reinstate me, give me back everything, if I refuse to testify. Prudence's stomach dropped. When did you get this? This morning. And you're telling me now? Because I wanted you to know I'm choosing this, not because I have nothing left to lose, because I think it's right. He stepped closer. I'm not the man I was 8 months ago, the one who cared more about reputation than truth. That version of me is dead, and good riddance. Prudence studied him, this man who'd hurt her, helped her, destroyed himself to give her a fighting chance. You don't have to do this, she said softly. Yes, I do. Rowan, I ruined you in front of a crowd because I was weak. Tomorrow, I'm going to tell the truth in front of a court because I finally learned to be strong. His voice roughened. Let me do this, please. She wanted to argue, wanted to protect him from the consequences, but she also understood that this wasn't about her anymore. This was about him becoming someone he could live with. All right, she said. Then we do it together. He nodded, relief washing over his face. Together. But I'd say a set. The courtroom was packed, every seat filled, people standing along the walls, craning to see. News of the case had spread beyond Ashbourne, a seamstress taking on one of the county's most powerful families. It was scandal and spectacle wrapped together, the kind of thing people would talk about for years. Prudence sat at the plaintiff's table beside Thorne, her hands folded to hide their shaking. Across the aisle, Marcus Blackthorne sat flanked by 3 lawyers, his expression cold and confident. Magistrate Ashford entered, and the room fell silent. We are here, he began, to hear the case of Hale versus Blackthorne. Miss Hale, you may present your opening statement. Thorne stood. Your Honor, we will prove that Lord Marcus Blackthorne engaged in a deliberate campaign to destroy my client's business through fraud, bribery, and intimidation. We have financial records, witness testimony, and documented evidence of corruption. The lead defense lawyer, a man named Carlyle with silver hair and a voice like grinding stone, rose smoothly. Your Honor, this is a desperate attempt by a woman scorned to extort money from a respected family. The evidence is circumstantial at best, illegally obtained at worst. We'll determine that as we proceed, Ashford said. Call your first witness, Mr. Thorne. I call Miss Prudence Hale. Prudence stood, her legs unsteady. She moved to the witness stand, placed her hand on the Bible, and swore to tell the truth. Thorne approached gently. Miss Hale, please describe for the court what happened to your business beginning in March of this year. She took a breath. My shop was thriving. I had regular clients, 3 apprentices, a steady income. Then, after a personal dispute with Lord Rowan Blackthorne, everything changed. How so? Clients stopped placing orders. A competitor opened across town with funding I later learned came from the Blackthorne estate. I was subjected to a fraudulent inspection. Within weeks, I went from successful to barely surviving. And you believe this was orchestrated? I know it was. Carlyle stood. Objection, speculation. Sustained, Ashford said. Stick to facts, Miss Hale. Thorne nodded. Can you provide evidence of this orchestration? Yes. Financial records showing payments from the Blackthorne estate to Mrs. Carrick's shop. Payments to Magistrate Hewitt that correspond with the timing of my inspection. A pattern of interference too coordinated to be coincidence. Carlyle rose for cross-examination, circling her like a predator. Miss Hale, you had a romantic relationship with Lord Rowan Blackthorne, did you not? Her throat tightened. Yes. And when that relationship ended, you were upset? I was hurt. Hurt enough to fabricate these accusations? I didn't fabricate anything. But you admit you have reason to hold a grudge against the Blackthorne family. I have reason to seek justice. Or revenge, Carlyle smiled. No further questions. Prudence returned to her seat, hands trembling. Thorne leaned close. You did well, he murmured. She didn't feel like she'd done well. She felt exposed, raw, like Carlyle had peeled back her skin. Next witness, Ashford said. I call Lord Rowan Blackthorne. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Marcus's expression darkened. Rowan stood from the gallery, walked to the stand, and swore his oath. Thorne approached carefully. Lord Blackthorne, or should I say, Mr. Blackthorne, given your recent disownment, you were involved romantically with Miss Hale, correct? Yes. And can you describe the circumstances under which that relationship ended? Rowan's voice was steady. I ended it publicly, at a ball, because I was afraid of what my family would think. I humiliated her to protect my reputation. And after that? My uncle, Marcus Blackthorne, took steps to ensure Miss Hale couldn't recover. He funded a competitor. He arranged a fraudulent inspection. He systematically destroyed her livelihood to punish her for daring to be associated with our family. The courtroom erupted. Ashford banged his gavel. Order! Mr. Blackthorne, these are serious allegations. Do you have proof? Yes, Your Honor. Rowan pulled papers from his coat. Financial records. Correspondence between my uncle and Mrs. Carrick. Documents showing payments to Magistrate Hewitt. Carlyle shot to his feet. Your Honor, these documents were obtained illegally. They were given to me voluntarily, Rowan said, by people who no longer wanted to be complicit in my uncle's corruption. You're a disowned son with an axe to grind, Carlyle snapped. Your testimony is worthless. My testimony is the truth. Marcus rose, his voice cutting through the chaos. Rowan, stop this. You don't know what you're doing. Rowan turned to face his uncle. I know exactly what I'm doing. I'm exposing you for what you are, a bully who destroys anyone who doesn't bow to you. You're throwing away your future. I already did that when I chose cowardice over integrity. Rowan's voice hardened. But I'm done being the person you wanted me to be. I'd rather be honest and ruined than complicit and comfortable. Marcus's face went white with rage. Ashford banged the gavel again. Mr. Blackthorne, sit down. Lord Marcus, control yourself or I'll have you removed. He turned to Rowan. Continue. Rowan described everything. The meetings where Marcus discussed handling Prudence, the payments, the threats. His testimony was damning, detailed, unshakable. By the time he finished, the courtroom was silent. Carlyle tried to discredit him on cross-examination, but Rowan didn't waver. He answered every question with calm precision, never defensive, never uncertain. When he stepped down, he met Prudence's eyes for a brief moment. She nodded once. Thank you. Thorne called two more witnesses, a former employee of Marcus's who confirmed the payments, and a clerk who'd processed Mrs. Carrick's funding. Both testified reluctantly, clearly afraid, but their statements aligned with everything Rowan had said. Finally, Ashford called for closing arguments. Carlyle stood. Your Honor, this case is built on circumstantial evidence and the word of a vengeful ex-lover. Miss Hale seeks to destroy a respected family because her own poor choices led to professional failure. We ask that you dismiss these baseless accusations. Thorne rose. Your Honor, we have provided documented proof of fraud, bribery, and conspiracy. The defense has offered no explanation for the payments, the timing, or the coordination of attacks on Miss Hale's business. The evidence speaks for itself. We ask for justice. Ashford leaned back, silent for a long moment. I'll take this under advisement, he said finally. Court is adjourned. I'll deliver my ruling at 9 tomorrow morning. The gavel fell. Prudence stood on shaking legs, the room spinning slightly. It was done. All the evidence presented, all the testimony given. Now it was out of her hands. Thorne touched her shoulder. You did everything you could. Will it be enough? We'll know tomorrow. Outside, the sky was darkening. Prudence walked back to the shop alone, exhaustion dragging at every step. People stared as she passed, but she ignored them. Inside, the apprentices were waiting. Well? Beatrice asked breathlessly. We'll know tomorrow. But how did it go? Prudence sank into a chair. I don't know. I honestly don't know. They sat with her in silence, the four of them in the gathering dark, waiting for a verdict that would either save them or destroy them. The shop was quiet when Prudence woke at dawn. She dressed carefully, pinning her hair back with steady hands, forcing herself to eat a piece of bread she couldn't taste. At 8:30, she walked to the courthouse. The crowd outside was even larger than yesterday. She pushed through, avoiding eyes, and took her seat beside Thorne. At exactly 9, Ashford entered. The courtroom fell silent. I have reviewed all evidence and testimony, he said. This case has been unusual, troubling even. The accusations are serious, the implications far-reaching. Prudence's heart hammered. However, Ashford continued, the evidence is compelling. The financial records, the testimony, the documented pattern of interference all point to deliberate action taken against Miss Hale's business. Marcus's lawyers shifted nervously. That said, I must also consider the source of this evidence. Documents obtained through questionable means, testimony from witnesses with personal grievances. Ashford paused. In light of all this, I find the courtroom doors burst open. Everyone turned. A man stood in the doorway, rain-soaked, breathing hard. Inspector Grayson. Your Honor, he gasped. I have new evidence, critical evidence. Ashford's expression darkened. This hearing is concluded. You need to hear this. Grayson stumbled forward, pulling a folder from his coat. I was paid to file false reports against Miss Hale. Paid by Lord Marcus Blackthorne. I have the receipts, the letters, everything. The courtroom exploded. Marcus shot to his feet. This is a lie. It's not. Grayson's voice broke. I'm tired of being used, tired of ruining innocent people for money. He handed the folder to Ashford. It's all here, every bribe, every false accusation. I'll testify to all of it. Ashford opened the folder, his face going pale as he read. Prudence couldn't breathe, couldn't move. Grayson, the man who'd terrorized her apprentices, who'd been part of Marcus's weapon, had just handed them victory. But why? Ashford looked up slowly. Lord Marcus Blackthorne, in light of this new evidence, I am reopening these proceedings. You will answer to charges of fraud, bribery, and conspiracy. He turned to Prudence. Miss Hale, your case is substantiated. The court finds in your favor. The gavel fell, and the world tilted. The courtroom didn't erupt this time. It fractured. People surged to their feet, voices overlapping in confusion and shock. Marcus's lawyers huddled together, speaking in urgent whispers. Grayson stood near the bench, trembling, the folder still clutched in Ashford's hands like a loaded weapon. Prudence couldn't move. The words echoed in her skull, in your favor, but they felt distant, unreal, like something happening to someone else. Thorne grabbed her arm. Prudence, we won. I heard. Then why do you look like you're about to faint? Because I don't understand. She turned to where Grayson stood, his face pale and sweating. Why would he turn on Marcus? Thorne followed her gaze. Guilt, fear, maybe both. He lowered his voice. Or maybe Marcus pushed him too far. Ashford was reading through the documents, his expression growing darker with each page. Finally, he looked up. Lord Marcus Blackthorne approached the bench. Marcus stood slowly. For the first time since Prudence had known of him, even secondhand through Rowan's stories, he looked uncertain. His lawyers flanked him as he moved forward, but Ashford waved them back. Alone. Marcus stopped 3 feet from the bench. In the gallery, someone coughed. The sound echoed like a gunshot. These documents, Ashford said, voice cold, detail a pattern of criminal behavior spanning years. Bribery of public officials, fraudulent legal proceedings, conspiracy to destroy private enterprise. He set the folder down. Do you deny any of this? Marcus's jaw worked. I deny the legitimacy of evidence obtained through coercion. Inspector Grayson came forward voluntarily. Answer the question. Silence stretched. Prudence watched Marcus's face, watched the calculation behind his eyes, the rapid assessment of options. He was a man used to controlling every variable, and now the variables were burning down around him. I acted, Marcus said finally, in the best interests of my family. By destroying an innocent woman's livelihood? By protecting our name from scandal? Scandal, Ashford repeated. You mean your nephew's relationship with Miss Hale? A relationship he should never have pursued. She is a merchant. You are now a defendant in a criminal investigation. Ashford's voice cut like steel. I am referring this matter to the county prosecutor. You will answer charges of fraud, bribery, and conspiracy. Court officers, take Lord Blackthorne into custody, pending arraignment. The room exploded again. 2 officers moved toward Marcus, who drew himself up, his expression turning to ice. You're making a mistake, he said quietly. The mistake was yours. Ashford looked past him to Prudence. Miss Hale, the court finds in your favor on all counts. You are awarded damages in the amount of £1,000 to be paid by the Blackthorne estate within 30 days. Additionally, all interference with your business is to cease immediately, and your apprentices are to remain in your care without further challenge. £1,000. Prudence's mind stuttered on the number. It was more than she'd made in 5 years, enough to rebuild, enough to secure the shop's future for a decade. Furthermore, Ashford continued, I am ordering a full investigation into Magistrate Hewitt's conduct. If the allegations of bribery are substantiated, he will face criminal charges as well. He brought the gavel down one final time. This court is adjourned. The officers took Marcus by the arms. He didn't resist, but his face was a mask of controlled fury as they led him toward the side door. Just before he disappeared, he turned and looked directly at Prudence. The hatred in that look was absolute. Then he was gone. Prudence stood there, surrounded by noise and movement, feeling like the floor had dropped out from under her. People were congratulating her, strangers mostly, caught up in the drama. Thorne was talking to someone about next steps. Rowan was trying to push through the crowd toward her. She turned and walked out. Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving the street slick and gleaming. Prudence walked without direction, her feet carrying her away from the courthouse, away from the voices, away from the impossible thing that had just happened. She'd won. She'd actually won. The thought hit her all at once, and she stopped in the middle of the street, hands shaking. A carriage rattled past, the driver shouting at her to move, but she barely heard him. Prudence! Rowan caught up to her, breathless. Are you all right? I don't know. Her voice sounded hollow. I think so. I can't tell. You just took down one of the most powerful men in the county. I know. You should be celebrating. I should be. She looked at him. Why did Grayson do it? What changed? Rowan's expression darkened. I went to see him 2 nights ago. You what? I told him what we had, the evidence, the testimony. I said he could either go down with Marcus or save himself. He rubbed the back of his neck. I didn't think it would work, but I guess he'd been waiting for an excuse to break. Prudence stared at him. You risked, if Marcus had found out, he would have killed me. Probably. Rowan shrugged. But it worked. And now Marcus is the one facing charges instead of walking away clean. She wanted to be angry at him for taking that risk. wanted to scream at him for gambling with his life without telling her, but standing there in the wet street, looking at this man who'd destroyed himself to help rebuild her, she found she couldn't. "Thank you," she said quietly. "Don't thank me yet. This isn't over." "What do you mean?" "Marcus is in custody, but his family is still powerful. They'll appeal. They'll fight the damages. They'll do everything they can to make sure you never see that money." His voice was grim. "And they'll come after you. Not legally. They can't afford another public scandal, but quietly, viciously." Prudence felt the weight of it settle over her. The victory was real, but so was the danger. "Let them come," she said. Rowan smiled slightly. "You really are terrifying." "So you keep saying." They stood there for a moment, the street around them slowly returning to normal. Then Rowan glanced back toward the courthouse. "I should go. There'll be questions, paperwork, and I need to make sure Marcus's lawyers don't try anything underhanded." "Will you be safe?" "Safer than I was yesterday." He hesitated. "Will you?" "I'll manage." He nodded, started to leave, then turned back. "Prudence, I meant what I said in court about being done with the person I was. I know I don't have the right to ask anything from you, but if you'll let me, I'd like to try to earn back some fraction of what I destroyed." She studied him, this broken, honest version of the man who'd once been too afraid to stand in the same room with her. "We'll see," she said. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was a door left open. Rowan seemed to understand. He nodded once and walked away. Prudence turned toward the shop, her mind already racing ahead to what came next. The ruling was only the beginning. She needed to prepare for the backlash, protect the apprentices, figure out how to actually collect the damages Ashford had awarded. But first, she needed to tell the girls they were safe. She found them waiting in the shop, clustered around the work table, their faces anxious. When Prudence walked in, they all turned at once. "Well?" Beatrice breathed. Prudence set her bag down slowly. "We won." For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then Joanna burst into tears and Anne grabbed her, and Beatrice laughed, a sharp, disbelieving sound that turned into a sob. "We won?" she repeated. "Truly?" "The court ruled in our favor. Marcus Blackthorne is facing criminal charges. The apprenticeships are protected, and we're receiving damages." "How much?" £1,000. The room went silent. That was a fortune, a lifetime's fortune for girls who'd never had anything. "That means we're safe?" Joanna whispered. "For now, yes." "For now?" Anne's voice was small. "What happens next?" Prudence pulled out a chair and sat, gesturing for them to do the same. They gathered around her, 3 girls who'd trusted her when no one else would, who'd stayed even when staying was dangerous. "The Blackthorns will fight this," she said carefully. "They'll appeal. They'll try to delay payment, and they might try other ways to hurt us. We need to be prepared." "How do we prepare for that?" Beatrice asked. "We keep working. We rebuild our client base. We make this shop strong enough that they can't touch it." Prudence looked at each of them in turn. "But I want you to understand, you can leave. I have enough money now to give you each a settlement, references, help finding other positions. You don't have to stay and fight this battle with me." "Where would we go?" Joanna said. "Somewhere safer." "Safer than here?" Anne shook her head. "You took us in when no one else would. You taught us a trade. You fought for us in court." Her voice strengthened. "We're not leaving." "Anne's right," Beatrice added. "We stay." Prudence felt something crack in her chest. "It won't be easy." "Nothing worth doing is," Beatrice said, and Prudence almost laughed because the girl sounded exactly like her. "All right then, we stay, we fight, and we win." She stood. "But first we work. We have orders to finish." They returned to their stations, Beatrice to cutting, Anne to sewing, Joanna to pressing, and the shop filled with the familiar sounds of work. Normal, grounding. Prudence sat at her own table and picked up her needle, letting the rhythm of stitches calm her racing mind. They'd won the battle, but the war was just beginning. The first sign of trouble came 3 days later. Prudence was working late when someone knocked on the door. Sharp, insistent raps that made her tense. She opened it to find a courier holding a sealed letter. "Miss Hale?" "Yes." "This is for you." He handed over the letter and left quickly, like he didn't want to be associated with whatever it contained. Prudence broke the seal. The letter was brief, written in elegant script on expensive paper. Miss Hale, you have won a battle through deceit and manipulation of the courts. You believe this makes you untouchable. You are wrong. The Blackthorne family has survived far greater threats than a merchant with delusions of importance. We will not forget this humiliation, nor will we forgive it. Enjoy your victory while it lasts. It wasn't signed. It didn't need to be. Prudence read it twice, then walked to the fireplace and burned it. The threat was clear, but so was the fear behind it. They were rattled. Good. She went back to work. Over the next week, the town's attitude began to shift. At first, it was subtle. People who'd avoided her shop started nodding in the street. A few former clients returned with apologetic requests for new orders. The baker, who'd stopped speaking to her after the ball, gave her an extra roll with her morning purchase and muttered, "About time someone put those bastards in their place." But not everyone was pleased. The families who'd allied themselves with the Blackthorns, the merchants who'd relied on Marcus's patronage, the lawyers who'd taken his money, viewed Prudence with open hostility. She was a threat now, proof that power could be challenged. One morning, she found a dead crow nailed to her door. She took it down, disposed of it, and said nothing to the apprentices. But she started locking the windows at night and keeping a fire poker near her bed. Then the official retaliation began. The Blackthorne family's lawyers filed an appeal, arguing that Ashford had been biased, that the evidence had been tainted, that Grayson's testimony was unreliable. They requested a stay on the damages, which would freeze the payment indefinitely. Thorne fought back hard, filing counter-motions, citing precedent, building an ironclad case against the appeal. But legal battles move slowly, and in the meantime, Prudence had to survive on dwindling funds and sheer stubbornness. She was working on a dress for a new client, a merchant's wife who'd defected from Mrs. Carrick's burned shop, when Thorne arrived with news. The appeal was denied, he said, setting his case down. Prudence's hands stilled on the fabric. Completely? The higher court reviewed Ashford's ruling and found no grounds for reversal. They upheld everything, the damages, the criminal referral, all of it. So Marcus is facing trial, and you're getting your money. The estate has 30 days to pay, and this time there's no wiggle room. Prudence sat back, trying to process it. How much trouble is Marcus in? Significant. The prosecution is building a case based on Grayson's testimony and the documents. If convicted, he's looking at prison time and financial ruin. Good. Thorne raised an eyebrow. I thought you might feel some sympathy. For a man who tried to destroy me and terrorize 3 innocent girls? No, I hope they lock him away for years. Fair enough. Thorne pulled out another document. There's something else. The estate is offering a settlement again. £2,000 if you agree not to testify at Marcus's trial. Prudence stared at him. They're trying to buy my silence. Yes. After everything, after the court ruled, after the appeal failed, they still think I can be bought. Money is the only language they speak. She stood, pacing to the window. Outside, Ashbourne went about its business. Carts rattling past, merchants calling to customers, children playing in the street. Ordinary life, continuing despite everything. Tell them no, she said. Prudence, £2,000 is blood money. If I take it, Marcus walks free. His family learns they can commit crimes and buy their way out. And the next person they target won't have a voice to fight back. She turned to face Thorne. I'm testifying, whatever it takes. Thorne studied her for a long moment. Then he smiled. Small, but genuine. You're going to testify at the trial of one of the most powerful men in the county, knowing his family will despise you forever. Yes. And you're refusing £2,000 to do it? Yes. You're either the bravest person I've ever met or the most foolish. Probably both. He laughed, shaking his head. All right, I'll inform the estate. But Prudence, be careful. They've already shown they're willing to cross lines. This will make you an enemy for life. I already am one. After Thorne left, Prudence returned to her work, but her mind was elsewhere. The settlement offer was enormous, enough to secure not just the shop, but the apprentices' entire futures. Part of her wanted to take it, to finally be safe. But safety bought with silence wasn't real safety. It was just a prettier cage. She'd come too far to lock herself in one now. The payment from the estate arrived 3 weeks later, delivered by a grim-faced banker who counted out the money like it physically pained him. £1,000 in notes and coin spread across Prudence's work table. The apprentices stared at it in silence. "That's real money," Joanna finally whispered. "Actual, real money." "Yes," Prudence said. "What will you do with it?" She'd been thinking about that for days. The smart thing would be to save it, invest it, use it to weather whatever storms were coming. But the necessary thing was different. First, we pay off all our debts. Then we repair the shop. New window, fresh paint, better equipment. After that, we expand the apprenticeship program. Expand? Anne looked confused. Why? Because there are more girls like you out there. Girls who need trades, futures, a chance. Prudence met their eyes. We won this fight. Now we use what we won to make sure others don't have to fight as hard. Beatrice smiled slowly. You're going to make the Blackthorns regret ever crossing you. No, I'm going to make them irrelevant. Over the next month, the shop transformed. The broken window was replaced with new glass. The sign out front was repainted in bold letters, Hale and Daughters, Fine Tailoring. Inside, Prudence hired a carpenter to build additional workstations and purchased 3 new sewing machines. Then she put out the word, apprenticeships available, no experience necessary, room and board included. The response was overwhelming. Girls arrived from all over, some from Ashbourne, some from neighboring towns, some who'd traveled for days on rumors of a woman who'd take them in without family connections or dowries. Prudence interviewed each one carefully, looking for the ones who needed this most. She ended up taking 5 more, bringing the total to 8 apprentices, all working under one roof, learning a trade that would make them independent. The shop hummed with activity. Fabric covered every surface. The sound of machines clattered from dawn until evening. And slowly, carefully, Prudence built something that couldn't be destroyed by one powerful family's vendetta. She also started receiving visitors. Other merchants came seeking advice. Women who'd been threatened, men who'd been pressured, small business owners tired of being crushed by people like Marcus. Prudence listened to their stories, shared what she'd learned, and occasionally connected them with Thorn. Word spread. The seamstress who'd beaten the Blackthorns became a symbol, proof that the system could work, that power could be challenged, that justice was possible if you were willing to bleed for it. Prudence didn't feel like a symbol. She felt exhausted, but she kept going because stopping meant letting them win retroactively. Rowan came by the shop most evenings, not to intrude, just to check in. Sometimes he'd bring news, updates on Marcus's upcoming trial, rumors from the estate, warnings about which families were still loyal to the Blackthorns. Mostly, though, he just helped. He'd carry heavy bolts of fabric, he'd run errands, he'd sweep floors or clean machines, doing the unglamorous work without complaint. The apprentices warmed to him slowly. Joanna was the first, asking him to help her reach a high shelf. Then Anne, who discovered he could do basic arithmetic and drafted him to help with the account books. Even Beatrice, the most skeptical, eventually accepted his presence. One evening, Prudence found him in the back room, teaching Joanna how to tie a proper knot for securing thread. Like this, he was saying. Loop it twice, then pull tight. Joanna tried, fumbling. Rowan guided her hands patiently. There, see? Now it won't slip. Thank you, Mr. Blackthorn. Just Rowan. I'm not a Blackthorn anymore. Joanna smiled shyly and returned to her work. Rowan looked up to find Prudence watching from the doorway. I hope that's all right, he said. She asked for help. It's fine. Prudence moved into the room. You're good with them. They're good kids. They deserve someone who doesn't treat them like they're disposable. Is that what your family did to you? Rowan's expression flickered. Among other things. He set down the thread spool. I never told you what Marcus said. When he had his men beat me. What did he say? That I was weak. That choosing you over the family proved I didn't have the strength to be a Blackthorn. Rowan looked at his scarred knuckles. He was right. I don't have that strength. And I'm glad. Prudence sat on the workbench beside him. What will you do now, when all this is over? I don't know. I have some money saved, not much, but enough to start small. Maybe a trade. Something honest. He smiled crookedly. I'm not suited for much, but I can learn. You could work here. He turned to her, surprised. What? Not as a seamstress, but the shop needs someone to manage supplies, handle accounts, deal with vendors. The apprentices need supervising when I'm in court or meeting clients. She kept her voice level. It's not charity. You'd earn your pay. Rowan studied her face. Why would you offer that? Because you've proven you're willing to work for something instead of just expecting it. She met his eyes. And because everyone deserves a second chance. Even you. He was quiet for a long moment. Then, I don't deserve you. No? But maybe that's the point. We don't get what we deserve. We get what we fight for. Rowan laughed, soft, almost sad. All right. I'll work for it. Whatever you need. Good. You can start by organizing the fabric storage. It's a disaster. Yes, ma'am. He stood, moving toward the storage room, and Prudence watched him go. This wasn't reconciliation. She still carried the hurt of his betrayal, the memory of standing alone in that ballroom. But wounds could heal if given time, and maybe, just maybe, they could build something new from the wreckage of what had been destroyed. Marcus's trial began on a cold Tuesday in November. The courthouse was even more packed than before, people lining up hours early for seats. This wasn't just about a business dispute anymore. This was one of the county's elite-facing criminal charges, and the spectacle drew crowds like blood drew sharks. Prudence sat in the witness gallery beside Thorne, watching the proceedings with careful attention. The prosecution laid out their case methodically, documenting the bribes, the fraudulent inspections, the coordinated attacks on her shop. Grayson testified first, his voice shaking but steady. He detailed every payment Marcus had made, every false report he'd filed, every lie he'd told. The defense tried to paint him as a disgruntled employee seeking revenge, but the documentation was too thorough. Then they called Rowan. He walked to the stand wearing a simple coat, his hair neatly combed, his expression calm. When he swore the oath, his voice didn't waver. The prosecutor approached. Mr. Blackthorne, you were present during meetings where your uncle discussed Miss Hale, correct? Yes. What was the nature of these discussions? My uncle viewed her as a threat. He said she needed to be dealt with before she caused further embarrassment to the family. Dealt with how? Destroyed. Financially, socially, whatever it took to make her disappear. The courtroom murmured. The prosecutor continued, pulling detail after detail from Rowan's testimony. Dates, locations, specific conversations. By the time he finished, Marcus's defense was in shambles. Then Prudence was called. She walked to the stand, aware of every eye following her. The prosecutor was gentle, asking her to describe the attacks, the impact on her business, the fear for her apprentices. She answered each question clearly, refusing to let her voice shake. Then Marcus's lawyer stood for cross-examination. He was younger than Carlyle, sharper, with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Miss Hale, you claim my client orchestrated these attacks. But isn't it true you had every reason to fabricate these accusations? No. Your relationship with Rowan Blackthorne ended badly. You were humiliated, angry, seeking revenge. I was seeking justice. Convenient that you can't tell the difference. He paced in front of the stand. You've profited significantly from this case. £1,000 in damages. National attention. Your shop is thriving. Some might say you've done quite well out of this supposed persecution. Prudence's hands clenched. I would have done better without being persecuted in the first place. Or perhaps you saw an opportunity and seized it. A poor seamstress, elevated by scandal. I was never poor. I built a successful business through hard work. Your client tried to destroy it because he thought I wasn't worthy of his nephew. Her voice hardened. The only opportunity I seized was the chance to prove that people like him can't crush people like me without consequences. The lawyer's smile thinned. No further questions. Prudence stepped down, heart pounding, and returned to her seat. Thorne leaned close. You did well. I wanted to throttle him. I could tell. You managed not to, which is what matters. The trial continued for 2 more days. Witnesses testified. Evidence was presented. The defense tried to argue that Marcus had been acting within his rights as a landowner and businessman, but the prosecution dismantled every argument. Finally, the jury retired to deliberate. They were gone for 5 hours. When they returned, the foreman stood slowly. On the charge of bribery of a public official, guilty. On the charge of conspiracy to commit fraud, guilty. On the charge of criminal interference with lawful business, guilty. Marcus's face went white. His lawyers immediately began arguing for leniency, but the judge wasn't interested. Lord Marcus Blackthorne, you have been convicted of serious crimes that strike at the heart of our legal system. You used your wealth and position to corrupt officials and destroy innocent livelihoods. The court sentences you to 5 years imprisonment and a fine of £10,000 to be paid to the county. You are also barred from holding any public office or position of trust. The gavel fell. Officers moved to take Marcus into custody. He stood slowly, his movements stiff, and for just a moment, he looked at Prudence. The hatred was still there, but underneath it, finally, was something else. Fear. They let him out, and the courtroom erupted into chaos. Prudence sat very still, letting the noise wash over her. It was done. Truly done. Marcus Blackthorne, the man who'd wielded power like a weapon, who'd thought himself untouchable, was going to prison because she'd refused to disappear. Outside, the street was crowded with people waiting for news. When Prudence emerged, someone started clapping. Then another person joined. Within moments, the entire crowd was applauding. She stood there, overwhelmed, as strangers congratulated her, women gripping her hands, men tipping their hats, children staring with wide eyes. "You did it," someone said. "You actually did it." Prudence managed a nod, then pushed through the crowd toward home. At the shop, the apprentices were waiting. When she walked in, they didn't ask questions. They just surrounded her, Beatrice and Anne and Joanna and the 5 new girls, forming a circle of warmth and solidarity. "He's going to prison," Prudence said quietly. They cheered, and the sound filled the shop with something that felt like hope. That night, Prudence sat alone in the workroom, a cup of tea cooling beside her. The shop was quiet. The apprentices were asleep. Outside, Ashbourne settled into darkness. She'd won. Against impossible odds, against powerful enemies, against a system designed to crush people like her, she'd won. But victory felt different than she'd imagined. Not triumphant, just quiet, solid, like the moment after a storm when you realize the house is still standing. A knock at the door pulled her from her thoughts. She opened it to find Rowan holding a small package wrapped in brown paper. "I thought you might want this," he said. She unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a book, leather-bound, expensive. The title read, "The Law of Business Contracts." "For when they try again," Rowan said. "Because they will. Maybe not Marcus, he'll be locked up for years. But his family, his allies, people who think what happened to him was an injustice." Prudence ran her fingers over the embossed cover. "You think I need to become a lawyer now?" "I think you need to be prepared. Knowledge is the only real power people like us have." She looked up at him, at this man who'd betrayed her, helped her, destroyed himself to rebuild her. He looked different now, thinner, tired, but also clearer, like something clouded had been scrubbed away. "Thank you," she said. "For the book? For everything?" Rowan's throat worked. "I didn't do it for thanks." "I know, but you have it anyway." He nodded, started to leave, then hesitated. "Prudence, what you said before about second chances, did you mean it?" She considered the question carefully. "I meant you can earn one. I can't promise what that looks like, or when, but yes, I meant it." "That's enough." He smiled, genuine this time. "Good night, Prudence." "Good night, Rowan." She watched him walk away into the darkness, then closed the door and returned to the work table. The book sat there, heavy and solid, a tool for the battles still to come. Because Rowan was right. This wasn't over. The Blackthorns were wounded, but powerful families didn't die easily. They'd regroup, they'd plot, they'd wait for her to let her guard down. But Prudence had learned something important through all of this. She was stronger than she'd believed, braver than she'd imagined, and more stubborn than anyone who'd tried to break her. She picked up the book and began to read. Outside, Ashbourne slept. And inside a small shop on the edge of town, a woman who'd refused to be erased began preparing for whatever came next. 6 months after Marcus's conviction, winter gave way to a cold, tentative spring. Prudence stood at the shop window watching rain trace patterns down the glass. Her reflection ghosted over the street beyond. The new sign, Hale and Daughters, gleamed even in gray light, the gold lettering catching what little sun broke through the clouds. Behind her, the shop was chaos in the best way. 8 apprentices worked at their stations, fabric piled high, the clatter of machines creating a rhythm that had become as familiar as breathing. Orders filled the books 3 months out. The debt was paid. The roof no longer leaked. They'd survived. But surviving and thriving were different things, and Prudence was learning the gap between them was filled with vigilance. "Miss Hale?" Beatrice appeared at her elbow. "Mrs. Crawford is here for her fitting." Prudence turned from the window. "Show her to the back." The appointments filled her days now. Wealthy women who'd avoided the shop during the scandal but returned once Marcus was safely locked away. Their shame was subtle but present, hidden behind bright chatter about fabric and fashion. Prudence took their money without comment. She didn't need their apologies, just their business. Mrs. Crawford was a thin woman with nervous hands who fidgeted through the entire fitting. When Prudence finished pinning the hem, the woman cleared her throat. "Miss Hale, I wanted to say, that is, I should have—" "The gown will be ready next Tuesday," Prudence said evenly. £40 as we discussed." Mrs. Crawford's relief was palpable. "Yes, of course. Thank you." After she left, Beatrice raised an eyebrow. She wanted to apologize. "I know. You didn't let her. She can live with the discomfort. I did." Prudence moved back to her work table. "Besides, apologies are cheap. Loyalty when it matters is what counts." Beatrice smiled slightly. "You've gotten harder." "I've gotten practical." It was true. The woman who'd walked into Marlingford Hall 8 months ago believing in quiet dignity and earned respect had learned those things meant nothing against concentrated power. What mattered was being strong enough that people couldn't afford to dismiss you. Prudence had become that strong. But the cost showed in the fine lines around her eyes, the careful way she locked doors at night, the instinct to check shadows before stepping into alleys. The Blackthorne family hadn't disappeared just because Marcus was in prison. His brother, Lord William, had taken control of the estate, and while he was subtler than Marcus, he was no less dangerous. The threats came differently now. Not broken windows or dead birds, but quiet pressure. Vendors who suddenly couldn't supply her fabric. Landlords who raised rent on properties she'd considered expanding into. Small obstacles that added up, designed to exhaust rather than destroy. Prudence fought each one methodically, using the law book Rowan had given her like a weapon. She documented everything, filed complaints, dragged issues into daylight where they withered under scrutiny. It was exhausting, but she'd learned exhaustion was survivable. "Miss Hale," Anne called from the back. "Mr. Rowan, is here with the fabric order." Prudence looked up to find Rowan maneuvering a heavy bolt of wool through the door, his coat damp from rain. 6 months of hard work had changed him too. His hands were rougher now, his shoulders broader from carrying supplies. He'd grown a beard that made him look less like a disgraced aristocrat and more like any other working man. "Where do you want this?" he asked. "Storage room, second shelf." He nodded and disappeared into the back. The apprentices had stopped staring at him months ago, accepting his presence as part of the shop's strange patchwork family. He worked without complaint, never mentioned his former life, and slowly, painfully slowly, earned his place through reliability. Prudence still couldn't fully trust him. The wound he'd dealt her had scarred, and scars didn't disappear just because time passed. But she could work beside him, could rely on him for the unglamorous labor that kept the shop running. That was something. When Rowan emerged from the storage room, brushing dust off his coat, Prudence gestured him over. "I need you to run an errand. Take this to Thorne's office." She handed him a sealed envelope. "It's about the Maple Street property. The landlord is trying to back out of our agreement." Rowan's expression darkened. "William got to him." "Probably, but the contract is solid. Thorne will make sure it holds." "And if it doesn't?" "Then we find another property." She met his eyes. "We've been backed into corners before. We know how to fight our way out." He smiled slightly. "We do." After he left, Prudence returned to work, but her mind stayed on the problem. The Maple Street property was perfect, large enough to expand the apprentice program, positioned in a good part of town. Losing it would set them back months. But that was the game now. The Blackthorns pushed. She pushed back. Neither side winning decisively, just grinding against each other in a war of attrition. She was tired of it, The thought crystallized slowly over the following weeks as spring deepened and the shop continued thriving despite the obstacles. Prudence realized she'd been playing defense since the trial ended, reacting to each new attack, each new pressure point. It was time to go on offense. She called a meeting in the shop after hours. All 8 apprentices, Rowan and Thorne, gathered around the work tables. "I have a proposal," Prudence began. "We're doing well, better than well, but we're still vulnerable. One family with enough influence can make our lives difficult indefinitely." "So what do?" Beatrice asked. "We make ourselves too important to target." Prudence unfolded a map of Ashbourne and the surrounding county. "Right now, we're one shop. Successful, but isolated. I want to change that." She pointed to 3 towns marked on the map. "We open sister shops, train apprentices there, create a network. If the Blackthorns pressure us in Ashbourne, we have income from elsewhere. If they try to cut off our supply chains, we have alternatives." Thorne leaned forward, studying the map. "That's ambitious." "It's necessary. Right now, William can chip away at us because all our resources are concentrated here. If we spread out, we become harder to destroy." "We'd need capital," Rowan said. "Buildings, equipment, trainers for new apprentices. We have the damages from the trial, and we're profitable enough to invest." Prudence looked around the room. "But this only works if you're all willing. It means more work, more risk. Some of you might need to relocate to manage the new locations." The apprentices exchanged glances. Finally, Anne spoke up. "I'll go, wherever you need me." "Me too," Beatrice added. "I'm tired of hiding from them. Let's build something they can't tear down." One by one, the others agreed. Even Joanna, the youngest, raised her hand. Thorne shook his head, smiling. "You're going to turn this into an empire." "I'm going to turn this into something that survives me," Prudence corrected. "That's different." Over the next 3 months, the plan took shape. They leased a building in Thornbury, 20 miles east. Beatrice relocated there with 2 of the newer apprentices, setting up shop in a building that had once been a bakery. The first month was brutal. Slow business, suspicious locals, equipment that kept breaking down. But Beatrice was stubborn as iron. She undercut local competitors, offered free alterations for the first month, and slowly built a client base through sheer determination. The second location opened in Fairhaven, a port town with a growing merchant class. Anne took charge there, bringing a different approach, focusing on functional clothing for working families rather than the fine dresses that sustained Ashbourne. It worked. Within weeks, Anne's shop was packed with sailors' wives ordering sturdy coats, merchants needing work clothes, dockhands wanting repairs. The third location, Milford, was the riskiest. It was the closest to the Blackthorn estate, deep in territory where William's influence ran strong. Prudence took that one herself, unwilling to send the apprentices into potential danger. She opened the shop on a Tuesday morning in late summer. The building was small, wedged between a butcher and a cobbler, but it had good light and solid bones. Exactly 3 customers came that first week. Prudence worked anyway, setting up displays, organizing stock, waiting. She knew William would make a move. The question was what form it would take. The answer came on the 8th day. A group of men arrived just before closing, 5 of them, rough-looking, the kind hired for intimidation. The leader was a broad man with a scarred face who leaned against her counter like he owned it. "You're Miss Hale." "I am." "You should close this shop." Prudence set down her scissors carefully. "Why would I do that?" "Because Milford doesn't need your kind of trouble. We're a peaceful town. Don't want the problems you bring." "I make dresses." "What problems could that possibly bring?" The man smiled without warmth. "The kind that come when you make enemies of important families. The kind that end with broken windows and burned buildings." He leaned closer. "Take my advice. Close up. Go back to Ashbourne. Forget about expanding into Lord William's territory." Prudence studied him, the swagger, the assumed authority, the casual threat. She'd seen it all before. "No," she said simply. The man's expression hardened. "You sure about that?" "Completely." He straightened, signaling to his companions. "Your funeral." They left, but the threat hung in the air like smoke. Prudence locked the door behind them and stood in the empty shop, heart pounding. She should have been afraid, should have reconsidered, but instead she felt something else. Anger, cold, focused, and absolute. She was done being threatened. The next morning, Prudence went to the local magistrate's office. She brought documentation, proof of the lease, business licenses, and a written account of yesterday's visit, complete with descriptions of each man. The magistrate, a tired-looking man named Foster, read through it without enthusiasm. Miss Hale, I sympathize, but these are serious accusations. Do you have proof these men were sent by Lord William? They admitted it. That's hearsay. Then investigate, question them. Make it clear that threatening business owners won't be tolerated in Milford. Foster sighed. Lord William is an important... I don't care. Prudence's voice sharpened. I'm a legitimate businesswoman operating within the law. If your office can't protect that, I'll file a formal complaint with the county and make sure every newspaper from here to the capital knows Milford's magistrate enables intimidation. Foster's face went pale. The scandal with Marcus had made headlines. The last thing any official wanted was association with another Blackthorn corruption case. I'll look into it, he said finally. Good. I'll expect a report within the week. She left before he could backtrack. That afternoon, Rowan arrived from Ashbourne, his expression grim. I heard what happened, he said. Are you all right? I'm fine. Prudence, those men, if William sent them, then he's getting desperate, which means we're winning. She moved to the window, watching the street. He thought I'd run. I'm not running. You're going to get hurt. Maybe, but I'm not leaving. Rowan was quiet for a moment. Then, what do you need? Witnesses, documentation. Every time they try something, I want it recorded and reported. We make this so public, so scrutinized, that William can't move without everyone watching. That'll make him angrier. Good. Angry people make mistakes. She was right. Over the next 2 weeks, William's men tried 3 more times to intimidate her, once following her home, once blocking her shop entrance, once spreading rumors about immoral conduct. Each time, Prudence documented everything, filed reports, made noise. The local newspaper, intrigued by the conflict, started covering it. Small articles at first, then larger ones. The seamstress versus the Lord. David and Goliath in a new incarnation. Public opinion shifted. People started visiting the shop out of curiosity, then out of solidarity. The same pattern that had played out in Ashbourne repeated here. The underdog effect. The sense that supporting her was a strike against unchecked power. Within a month, the Milford shop was profitable. William tried once more. A fire broke out in a neighboring building, spreading smoke and panic, but ultimately controlled before reaching Prudence's shop. The constable ruled it accidental, but the timing was too convenient. Prudence went to Foster's office with evidence connecting one of William's employees to the building. Foster, terrified of another scandal, finally acted. He opened an investigation, questioned witnesses, made it clear that further incidents would result in charges. The harassment stopped. Not because William had given up, Prudence knew, but because she'd made the cost too high. Every attack drew attention. Every threat became public record. She'd turned herself into a liability, easier to ignore than to destroy. It was a fragile victory, but it was victory nonetheless. 3 months later, all 3 satellite shops were thriving. Prudence stood in the original Ashbourne location, reviewing reports from Beatrice, Anne, and the managers she'd hired for Milford. Revenue was up 40%. They'd trained 12 new apprentices across all locations. The network was growing, becoming real. We need more space, Beatrice's report concluded. Thornbury is outgrowing the current building. Prudence made a note to look into expansion properties. Then she set the reports aside and allowed herself a moment of simple satisfaction. They'd done it. Built something that could survive attacks, weather storms, grow despite opposition. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. She opened it to find a woman in expensive clothes standing on the step, older, elegant, with silver hair pinned in an elaborate style. Miss Hale? Yes? I'm Lady Catherine Hendricks. May I come in? Prudence recognized the name. A member of the minor nobility, widow of a prominent judge, known for social influence if not vast wealth. She stepped aside, gesturing to a chair. Lady Catherine sat gracefully, studying the shop with sharp eyes. I've heard a great deal about you, she said, about your case against the Blackthorns, your expansion into new towns, your resilience. I do what's necessary. Indeed, Catherine folded her hands. I'm here with a proposition. I represent a group of women. wives, widows, daughters of prominent men who are interested in investing in ventures run by capable women. We've been watching your operation with interest. Prudence kept her expression neutral. What kind of investment? Capital to expand further. Connections to suppliers and clients. Protection from the kind of harassment you've faced. Catherine smiled slightly. In exchange, we'd like a partnership arrangement, minority stake, advisory role, access to your business model for replication in other regions. It was a lifeline. More than that, it was legitimacy, protection, resources she couldn't acquire alone. It was also a cage, however gilded. I appreciate the offer, Prudence said carefully, but I'll need time to consider it. Of course. Take a week. Discuss it with your solicitor. Catherine stood. But, Miss Hale, opportunities like this don't come often for women in our position. I'd hate to see you refuse out of pride. After she left, Prudence sat alone in the shop, turning the offer over in her mind. She met with Thorne that evening. He read through the proposal Catherine had left. Formal, detailed, surprisingly generous. This is legitimate, he said finally, and advantageous. The capital alone would let you expand into 6 more locations within a year. But I'd lose control. Partial control. You'd still be majority owner and primary decision maker. They'd just have oversight and profit sharing. Prudence stared at the papers. I built this because I wanted something that was completely mine. Taking partners feels like compromising that. It is compromising, but it's also growing. Thorne set the documents down. Prudence, you've proven you can survive alone. Now the question is whether you want to thrive with help. She thought about it for 3 days, discussed it with the apprentices, with Rowan, with herself in the quiet hours before dawn. Finally, she reached a decision. She invited Lady Catherine back to the shop and laid out her counterproposal. I'll accept investment, Prudence said, but on my terms. You get 15% equity and advisory role only, no voting power on operations. I maintain full control of hiring, training, and business direction. And one more condition, which is, part of the investment goes toward establishing a fund for women who want to start their own businesses but lack capital or connections. We create a network that helps others the way you're helping me. Catherine raised an eyebrow. That's quite ambitious. It's necessary. I didn't survive the Blackthorns just to become another version of them, hoarding power and crushing competition. I want to build something that creates opportunity. Catherine studied her for a long moment. Then she smiled, genuine this time. You're either remarkably naive or remarkably visionary. I'm not sure which. Probably both. Very well. I'll present your terms to the group. But Miss Hale, if we agree to this, you understand it makes you responsible for more than just your own success. Other women will be counting on you. I know. The investment group agreed. The contracts were signed on a cold November morning, 1 year almost to the day after Prudence had walked out of Marlingford Hall in the rain. The influx of capital transformed everything. Within 6 months, 3 more shops opened. The apprentice program expanded to include not just seamstresses, but bookkeepers, designers, business managers. The fund Catherine had agreed to became operational, providing small loans and mentorship to women starting ventures across the county. Prudence found herself traveling constantly, visiting locations, training managers, solving problems. It was exhausting and exhilarating in equal measure, and through it all, the Blackthorns faded into background noise. William tried a few more subtle maneuvers, but Prudence's network was too dispersed, too public, too protected by her new investors. Attacking her meant attacking women connected to half the county's influential families. He eventually stopped trying. Marcus, locked away in prison, became a cautionary tale rather than a threat. Prudence heard occasional updates through Rowan, his health declining, his influence evaporated, his family distancing themselves from the scandal he'd created. She felt no satisfaction in his suffering, just a quiet recognition that justice, however imperfect, had been served. 2 years after the trial, Prudence stood in front of the original Ashbourne shop, watching workers install a new sign. It was larger than the old one, more ornate, but the words were the same: Hale and Daughters. Rowan stood beside her, his hair graying at the temples, his hands scarred from honest work. "It looks good," he said. "It does." "Are you happy?" The question surprised her. Prudence considered it carefully. I'm satisfied. That's different than happy, but it's enough. Is it? She looked at him, this man who'd destroyed her and helped rebuild her, who'd proven through 2 years of quiet labor that change was possible. Rowan, what are we doing? He blinked. What do you mean? This, us. You work here. You live above the shop. We have dinner together twice a week. The apprentices call you Uncle Rowan, but we've never actually discussed what this is. Rowan was quiet for a moment, then, what do you want it to be? I don't know. Part of me thinks I should never trust you again, that what you did was unforgivable. It was unforgivable. But you've spent 2 years trying to earn forgiveness anyway. Prudence turned to face him fully. Why? Because I love you. I've loved you since before I was stupid enough to ruin it, and I'll keep loving you whether you ever forgive me or not. The words hung between them, simple and devastating. I can't give you what we had before, Prudence said quietly. That version of me who believed in fairy tales and thought love was enough, she's gone. You killed her. I know. But there might be something else, and something built on honesty instead of secrets, on work instead of romance. She paused. I can't promise it'll be what you want. I don't want what we had before either. That was built on my cowardice. Rowan's voice was steady. I want whatever you're willing to build now, even if it's just this. Working together, living parallel lives. That's more than I deserve. Prudence studied his face, older now, marked by consequences, but honest in a way it had never been before. All right, she said, and then we try, slowly, with eyes open. Slowly, Rowan agreed. I can do slow. She almost smiled. Good. Because I'm not signing anything, taking your name, or giving up 1 inch of what I've built. I wouldn't expect you to. And if you disappoint me again, you'll destroy me so thoroughly there won't be enough left to bury. I know. This time she did smile. Then we understand each other. 6 months later, they married in the shop after hours. No grand ceremony, no elaborate gown, just Thorne officiating, the apprentices as witnesses, and vows they wrote themselves focused on partnership rather than possession. Prudence kept her name, kept her business, kept her independence, but she gained something too. A partner who'd learned the hard way that love meant supporting someone's strength, not limiting it. They worked together, built together, sometimes fought, because neither had learned to be easy or agreeable, but always with the understanding that this was a collaboration, not a surrender. 3 years after the wedding, the network of shops had grown to 15 locations across 5 counties. Prudence stood at the head of a long table in a rented hall, looking at the gathered managers, women she'd trained or hired, each running their own operation, building their own futures. The fund has approved 12 new loans this quarter, she announced. We're also expanding into fabric manufacturing. We'll be producing our own materials within the year, which means better prices and more control over supply. Anne raised her hand. What about the push into the northern counties? Delayed. We need to consolidate before expanding further, but it's still on the schedule for next year. They discussed operations, problem-solved challenges, planned for growth. It was boring work in many ways, logistics, finances, contracts. Nothing glamorous, but it was solid, real, sustainable. After the meeting, Beatrice pulled Prudence aside. There's something you should know. Lady Blackthorne, William's wife, requested an appointment at the Milford shop. Prudence went still. For what? A gown. She specifically requested to work with you. It could be a trap. A final attempt at what? Humiliation, revenge, or it could be something else. An acknowledgement. A white flag. Schedule it, Prudence said. I'll handle it personally. A week later, Lady Blackthorne arrived at the Milford shop, a tall woman with tired eyes and expensive clothes that didn't quite hide her discomfort. Prudence greeted her professionally. Lady Blackthorne, thank you for choosing our shop. Miss Hale. A pause. Or is it Mrs. Blackthorne now? I heard you married Rowan. I kept my name. Miss Hale is fine. Of course you did. Something that might have been respect flickered across the older woman's face. I need a gown for the summer season, something elegant but not ostentatious. My husband prefers I avoid drawing attention. The subtext was clear. The Blackthorne name carried shame now, not prestige. Prudence took measurements in silence, professional and efficient. When she finished, Lady Blackthorne spoke again. I wanted to apologize for my family's actions. Marcus was excessive. William enabled him. I should have intervened. Prudence set down her measuring tape. Why didn't you? Because I was afraid of becoming a target myself. Women in my position have so little power. We protect ourselves by not making waves. She met Prudence's eyes. You didn't have that luxury, or you refused to take it. Either way, you did what I couldn't. It wasn't a full apology, but it was acknowledgement, which was rarer. The gown will be ready in 3 weeks, Prudence said. We'll send notice when it's time for the final fitting. Lady Blackthorne nodded and left. Prudence stood in the empty shop processing the encounter. The Blackthorns, once the source of her greatest fear, had become just another customer. Diminished. Ordinary. The realization was both satisfying and strangely hollow. That evening, she returned to Ashbourne to find Rowan reviewing supply orders at the kitchen table they'd wedged into the back room. How was Milford? He asked. Interesting. Your cousin's wife came for a fitting. Rowan looked up, surprised. Catherine? What did she want? A dress, and maybe absolution. I'm not sure which. Did you give it to her? I gave her a dress. The rest is her problem. Prudence sat across from him. Your family is broken, you know, truly broken. Marcus in prison, William scrambling to maintain respect, the estate's influence crumbling. Good. You don't feel any regret? Rowan set down his pen. I feel regret for the person I was when I belonged to them, but the family itself? No. They earned their destruction. Prudence nodded slowly. She understood that. Becoming someone better sometimes meant burning down who you'd been. 5 years after Marcus's conviction, Prudence received a letter. It came from the prison where Marcus was held, forwarded through Thorne's office. She almost threw it away unread, but curiosity won. The handwriting was shaky, the words sparse. Miss Hale, I am dying. The doctors say months at most. I write not seeking forgiveness, which I don't deserve, but to offer something I should have given years ago. Acknowledgement. You were right. I was wrong. I used my power to crush you because I could, because I'd never been challenged, because I believed might made right. You proved otherwise. I have cost my family everything, reputation, wealth, respect. My brother struggles under the weight of my mistakes. My name is synonymous with corruption. And you? You built an empire from the rubble I tried to create. History will remember you as the woman who refused to disappear. It will remember me as the fool who tried to make you. That is justice, I suppose. Lord Marcus Blackthorne. Prudence read it twice, then folded it carefully and placed it in the box where she kept important documents. It wasn't an apology, but it was truth. And truth, she'd learned, was often more valuable than remorse. Marcus died 3 weeks later. The funeral was small, poorly attended. Prudence didn't go, but she sent flowers. White lilies, traditional and impersonal. Not forgiveness, just acknowledgement that the war was over and she'd won. On the 10-year anniversary of the trial, the county held a ceremony. Prudence was invited to speak, the woman who'd challenged corruption and won, who'd built something lasting from almost nothing. She stood at a podium in front of 200 people, including officials, business owners, and women from across the region who'd used her fund to start their own ventures. I'm not here to talk about revenge, she began, or even justice, though both played their parts. I'm here to talk about what happens after you refuse to be erased. She spoke about the apprentices who'd become managers, the shops that had become anchors for their communities, the network that had grown from one stubborn woman's refusal to disappear. Power protects itself, she said. It silences. It crushes. It makes you believe you're too small to matter. But the truth is simpler. Power is terrified of people who won't stay small, who build anyway, who survive anyway, who say no when they're supposed to say yes, sir. The crowd was silent, listening. I didn't win because I was special. I won because I had nothing left to lose and refused to lose it quietly. Because I found people, apprentices, lawyers, investors, even a reformed fool. She glanced at Rowan, who smiled, who believed the world could be different. She paused, looking out at the faces watching her. We made it different. Not perfect, not fair, but different enough that the next woman who gets crushed has a roadmap, has proof it's possible, has a system that might, just might, listen. The applause was thunderous. Afterward, dozens of people wanted to speak with her, shake her hand, share their stories. Prudence listened to each one, exhausted but present. Finally, as the crowd thinned, a young woman approached, maybe 20, poorly dressed, nervous.
Miss Hale, I'm sorry to bother you, but I have a business idea for baking, and I heard about your fund, and I thought.
Prudence smiled. Come by my office tomorrow. Bring your plan. We'll talk. The girl's face lit up. Really? Really? She watched the girl leave, hope written in every line of her body, and felt the full weight of what she'd built. Not just shops, not just wealth, possibility. That night, Prudence and Rowan sat on the roof of the Ashbourne shop, watching stars emerge in the darkening sky. Are you happy? Rowan asked. The same question as years ago, but gentler now. Prudence considered it. I'm building things that matter. I'm surrounded by people I chose. I have work that means something beyond just surviving. She looked at him. Is that happiness? I think so. We're close enough. Then yes, I'm happy. They sat in comfortable silence, years of shared history settling around them like a familiar coat. Do you ever think about that night? Rowan asked quietly. At Marlingford Hall? Sometimes. Do you wish it had gone differently? Prudence thought about the woman she'd been, hopeful, naive, believing quiet dignity would be enough, about the path that woman would have walked, small and constrained and safe. No, she said finally. If you hadn't destroyed me, I never would have learned to build myself back stronger. I'd have spent my life being grateful for crumbs instead of demanding the whole table. That's a brutal way to learn. Most important lessons are. Rowan reached for her hand. She let him take it, their fingers intertwining with the ease of long practice. Thank you, he said, for letting me earn this. Us. Whatever we are. We're partners, Prudence said. In business, in life, in building something that lasts. That's what we are. I can live with that. Good. Because you're stuck with it. They stayed on the roof until the stars were bright and full. Two people who'd broken each other and themselves, who'd learned through fire and failure what mattered, who'd built something real from the wreckage of what could have been. Below them, the shop stood solid and dark, the sign reading Hale and Daughters Catching Moonlight. And all across the county, in 15 different towns, women worked at tables and buildings that bore that same name, building futures with their own hands, protected by a network one stubborn seamstress had refused to let die. Prudence had walked into a ballroom believing she was stepping toward a future. She'd been right, just not the future she'd imagined. This one was better, harder, earned, built on truth instead of fantasy, but better, and entirely, completely hers.